Could or even should the F-20 TIGERSHARK be added to Germany? Let's talk a little bit about it. Hello guys, once again it's Matt. Thank you all the members and Patreons. Make sure to subscribe. And yeah guys, it was actually passed to the developers to consider adding into the game the F-20 to Germany in May 2024, right? So kind of a while back even. But is the F-20 actually an option to be added for the Germans? Would it be actually fun or even, logic to actually add this aircraft to the German tech tree, or especially as a German premium? So let's talk a little bit about it. Everybody knows the F-20. It is in the game. It is a super F5, used to be called the F5G as well. But basically the differences here to the F5, it is that it is an F5 with a different engine, modernizations to the cockpit, canopy, radar, everything like that, to actually be a cheap alternative to the 4th generation aircraft that were being developed and released to be sold. So it was an aircraft, even Northrop, if I'm not mistaken, was it Northrop? I have to check. I think it was Northrop. Yeah, Northrop actually claimed that it was 95% as effective as an F-16 from the time, while being 70% of the cost, being an aircraft that is using an engine that was very reliable, the F404, and an aircraft that was and did use a lot of the same parts as an F5, right? So all the production parts and chains and everything were already in place to actually kind of maintain this aircraft. So it's a very cheap aircraft and very effective because it used a very modern radar for the time, very modern missiles, very modern engine, very modern cockpit for the time. This was considered by the Germans during the 80s, the early stages of the 80s, 1984 more or less, right? And they even did a whole bunch of tests in the Edward AFB in California. This was made and conducted by the WTD-61. Yes, the same WTD that tested the Tornado. This was basically an evaluation team or squadron or whatever you want to call it, to test out aircraft for the Germans to actually buy. That's pretty much what it was, right? The problem is that they considered the F-20 unsuitable to the needs of the German Air Force. The objective was to basically seek a replacement for the older F-104Gs, right? And fly along the F-4Fs. That was mainly the objective of these aircraft, right? But they eventually just opted out to pursue the ICE modernization of the F-4F and later the Eurofighter Typhoon in the long term, right? So the F-20 kind of became a baby without a father, right? Because, it had a father, but no adoption. I don't know what I'm talking. Jesus, I have a severe flu right now, but ignore me. But at the end of the day, it was an aircraft that nobody really bought or anything like that. They didn't perceive it as effective maybe as the F-16s and other aircraft, so it wasn't just really a good alternative for the Germans, especially because modernizing the already flying F-4Fs would probably be a much cost-effective measure, right? And of course it would even be, as we saw, even a better option than the F-20, right? Of course, if the F-20 were chosen, was to be chosen, right? You would actually use M120s and everything like that in the far future, right? But the F-4F eventually got that anyway, right? And it got all the upgrades needed to get Germany far enough to actually buy the Eurofighter later in the late 90s, early 2000s, right? So it's an aircraft that kind of didn't need to exist for the German tech tree. But in the game, do we really need it? That's the thing. It's always a question of needing and wanting. It's every single aircraft that is added, people will talk about it in these two ways. Because is it needed? Well, it depends. As a tech tree vehicle, not really, right? Because think about it. It wasn't added to the service option, so normally we only have most of the time service aircraft in the tech trees. So this is just a box that wouldn't click. But, I mean, we have the F-16 AJ, we have the AK-141, we have many aircraft and tanks that are prototypes, that are vehicles that didn't get into service. So, is it needed on the part of, you know, just overall gameplay-wise, we need a gap-filling aircraft between certain aircraft in the German tech tree? Well, then it depends again, because, I mean, the F4F is an 11.0 aircraft. The ICE is at a 13.3, so there's a big gap there, and a 12.7 F-20 would actually fit right in between those, gapping basically these, you know, problem of jumping this high of a BR still using an F4, right? So it could be added, but at the same time, it's not really needed because we already have 12.7 aircraft from the German tech tree, right? The more the better, but still, like, if it's just more grind and not too many people will care about it, is it really necessary? At the end of the day, no. So, in my opinion, it depends if this aircraft is needed or not, but at the end of the day, most people will probably think that it's not really needed, and it's just not good enough to be a good option, as good enough in the sense of being a good option to be a tech tree vehicle, being an aircraft that was never used by the Luftwaffe, only for testing, short period of time, and eventually cancellation, right? So at the end of the day is, do we want an F-20 for the Germans? That's, I think, the question that everybody should answer. And in my opinion, probably a lot of people, especially German mains, would like to see this. But again, a premium F-20 would make sense, but isn't there another option out there for the Germans? I'm sure there is, right? And there is even other options for other nations. A lot of people were asking, for example, an F-15 for the French, because the French tested the F-15, or they tried to sell it for the French, the US, right? So it kind of opens a precedent of these weird evaluation tests and aircraft that got a flag and a roundel on their prototype, and then it could be added. It kind of opens a precedent that I kind of don't like. I don't want to see a French F-15, for example. So maybe adding the F-20 for the Germans is not such a good idea. But you tell me, do you think the Germans deserve, or you want the Germans to actually have an F-20 to basically be in the top tiers of the tech tree, helping it out a little bit, or as a premium, since the premiums of the Germans are a little bit older and in a lot of regards a lot less complex and good enough to be a top tier premium for people to buy? Not that we need a top tier premium, but you know what I mean, right? So let me know in the comments, because I honestly, I would love to see this skin and stuff and having a premium bonus or anything like that for the Germans using F-20. But at the end of the day, it opens up a precedent that I really dislike, of having these types of aircraft that are just tested by one nation, or barely that, get added to that nation. Because we need variety throughout the game, and not just one type of aircraft being spread around in most nations. And sometimes this happens with F-16s, for example, F-104s, F-86s, but when we have other options, it's good to avoid that type of line of thinking, right? So let me know in the comments if you would like to see the F-20 in the German tech tree, and I see you guys on the next one. Bye guys, see ya.